So today I wanted to talk about something very near and dear to my heart, which is, you guessed it, H2O, Just Add Water, the hit Nickelodeon show from the 2000s. Now, I want to talk about this show because I just have a lot of questions. We're dealing with mermaids, we're dealing with the supernatural, and with that always comes rules that, they have to follow. I have some questions about those rules because sometimes they are inconsistent. But first, just in case you haven't seen the show, here's just a general little recap of what it is. So this show follows Emma, Cleo, and Ricky and their adventures. So in the first episode, Cleo gets tricked into getting on this guy's boat, and then he sort of sends her adrift. But while she's adrift, Ricky shows up and they decide to take the boat for a bit of a joyride. They also run into Cleo's friend Emma, who joins up with them. After a while of riding around in the boat runs out of fuel, and the girls decide that they need to paddle to an island in the distance because they're just too far out. Emma tries to make a phone call, but unfortunately they can't make the call because there's no signal. So the girls have to reach higher ground in hopes that they'll be able to call someone. On their way up higher, they're passing a little waterfall that has some rocks, but it's all slippery, and trying to make a jump, Cleo falls into a cave. Cleo is fine, but Emma and Ricky end up falling down the cave too. The cave itself has a small pool of water, and because it's a dormant volcano, they can see the sky, but there's really no way out. Emma, being a swimmer, suggests that there might be a way out through the pool. She goes down and swims and ultimately is able to find a way out. Eventually, they convince Cleo that it's the only way that they're going to survive. With the full moon over them, suddenly the water around them starts to bubble and glow a little bit. The girls are a little weirded out, but they don't think much of it. After they swim through the pool, they are quickly found by the nautical police. Next morning, things have seemed to go back to normal, but as soon as any of them are hit by water, they grow a tail. The girls all meet up at Cleo's to talk about it, and it turns out that they've all been experiencing the same things. Cleo initially wants no part of this, and Ricky and Emma are left to try and figure out what's happening by themselves. After they run a few tests, they realize that they are definitely mermaids. Some other stuff happens. We meet Lewis, Cleo's friend, and they have a run-in with Zane. But with Cleo's newfound mermaid powers, she manages to make a fire hydrant explode, causing water to get all over Zane. Again, they meet up at Cleo's house. After a little bit of back and forth, they decide that they need to stick together and that no one can ever find out about their secret. And yeah, that's the first episode. After that, the rest of the series is them just trying to be normal teenage girls, but mermaid hijinks getting in the way and causing, drama and all that. Okay, so now that we know what the deal is with the show, let's just get right into it. My first question that I have about this show is, how do they shave? We see so many times them bathing, in their gigantic tubs, which, they are so lucky that they have bathtubs. A lot of people just have showers, but they're always bathing in these showers, and because they get touched by the water when they go to, take a bath or whatever, they immediately grow a tail. So they're not able to, shave their legs. I guess they could nair. I don't really know how nair works. I've never used it. Would they, or I guess they could do, those wax strips? I don't know. Sounds not fun. How do they pee? How do they pee? If they can't be touched by liquid, how do they pee? How do they pee? But really, how do they pee? If someone, accidentally, you're talking, you can't help it, a little bit of spit comes out, no one's fault, but does that count? Could that make them turn into a mermaid? And also, I guess kind of on that note of spit, what about their own saliva? I guess not, because that would turn them into a mermaid, but are they just breaking a rule for the sake of the show? I don't know. Do they always smell like fish? one could argue, well, they bathe Catherine. Remember, they take baths. But when they take a bath, they are a mermaid. So, by that, they're still a fish when they're taking a bath. So, do they always just smell like fish? What kind of perfume do you get? Or deodorant? Or do they just say, fuck it, I smell like a fish, you can deal with that? So this is a little nitty gritty of a question, but Charlotte. First of all, she sucks. She's the worst, and I hate her. Couldn't she just become a mermaid again? Like, they have that whole thing where they take away her powers, but also, I just have so many questions about that whole thing, because they can take away her powers, but they can't take away each other's powers. That doesn't really make sense. And then there's that old woman who's like, you can give up your powers. I did. And it's like, okay, but are you gonna share? Like, I want more of the lore. That's another thing. Like, we get, like, they have, like, those lockets in part of the show, and, like, we get some flashback, but, like, not a lot. I want to know more about the origin story. I want to know, I just want to know more. You know, that stuff is always, I think, interesting, and I feel like that's just sort of, like, lacking. But I guess that's less of, like, how does being a mermaid work in this world, and more of, like, I want to know mermaids past. Like, that would be interesting to me. I think this is my biggest sort of, like, pet peeve, I guess, about the show. They have one episode that is centered around the fact that there's going to be a dance, but none of them can go because they're going to be sweating. And if they sweat at the dance, they'll turn into mermaids because the sweat is water. Kind of. Which, again, goes back to my earlier issue of, like, how do they pee, but whatever. Anyway, sticking with the sweat. Are you trying to tell me that they don't sweat regularly? That is not good for their glands, first of all. But also, they live in Australia. The average temperature there in the summer is anywhere between, I looked this up, it's between 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot. You're telling me that they're not sweating? Like, also, on that note, humidity. It's humid. Like, that would make them sweat when they're just, you know, walking around, not really even, or just even sitting. So, this whole sweat thing kind of doesn't really make sense to me. Like, I feel like they could have just kept it really simple. Like, oh, if they get in the water, like, they, you know, turn into a mermaid. But it's literally any water. Any liquid that they come in contact with can, like, totally expose them. I don't know. Seems like an evolutionary issue. When they cry, do they turn into mermaids? I feel like they don't. I feel like we've seen them cry and they're human. I'm trying to, like, remember an episode. Like, usually when they cry, or, like, get upset, they go to, like, that cave thing to, like, chill and be by themselves. And they cry there, and they're already a mermaid at that point, so, like, I guess it's kind of hard for us to tell. But I feel like, I don't know. It just, sis, it don't add up. All this being said, I love the show. Even now that I'm older, it still holds a really special place in my heart. So these questions obviously are not deal breakers for me. But they're just things that don't make sense that I needed to voice. And if you feel the same way, let me know. If you have other questions, let me know. Maybe I'll do a part 2. It's just, some things don't add up. It just don't add up. Subscribe!